Hello and welcome to this Autodesk tutorial, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create a structural floor plan in Autodesk Revit. Well, this is a basic yet complete tutorial, so I'm going to show you everything you need to know to actually start creating your structural projects, and also how to present your work using annotations, and also how to export your structural floor plans in well-defined structural sheets. If this is your first time in the channel, do want to hit the subscribe button and also leave a like for this video. It actually helps the algorithm and helps somebody else who might need to see the video. And for more in-depth tutorials, you can head over to the channel to look at other videos. So let's get into it. So for this tutorial, we'll be using Autodesk Revit 2025, but don't worry, the core principles are very simple. So the first thing we're going to do is actually going to create a new project. So the first thing we want to do is to go into the model space and then create a new project, and just go ahead and click new, and it's going to ask you to create a new project. So you can go ahead and choose which unit you want to use. I'm currently using the metric principle, or the metric unit, sorry. So you're just going to go ahead and switch from imperial to metric. If you're using imperial, if you're used to imperial, you can go ahead and select that. But it's a multidisciplined, and that's what we have in Revit 2025 right now. Multidiscipline means you're going to find most of the structural, electrical, mechanical, and all those other items inside of this particular template. So we're going to just use metric multidiscipline. In case you want to find the previous templates or other templates, go ahead and click browse. It's going to take you to where all the other templates are. You can see commercial, electrical, mechanical, and all this kind of stuff, even plumbing as well, and of course structural analysis templates. So what we want to do is use multidiscipline metric. Just going to go ahead and click OK. Once Revit is fully loaded, you can see the workspace, and then currently we are in the architecture tab, but since we're creating a structural floor plan and a structural model in this video, we're going to just switch from the architectural tab to the structure tab. So this is where we're going to spend most of our time. And if you look at the Revit workspace, the structure tab has structure and also connection in case you're working with steel, and you can go ahead and create connections for structural elements like that. It also has foundations and of course reinforcement bars in case you want to go ahead and input reinforcement into your structural columns, especially concrete columns. I think they're the ones that use rebars and reinforcements. You can also see components where you can go ahead and place components inside of every structural component. And you also have the annotations where you can model text and of course model lines that you can use inside of Revit. There's also shaft openings. Datum is going to become really relevant in this particular tutorial. You're going to see that very soon. You also have the reference plane. This also come in handy inside of Autodesk Revit and structural modeling. So now that we see the top bar, you can look towards the left hand side, and this way you're going to see the properties panel. Now you can see here that we are inside the L1 architectural. So even though we're trying to create a structural model, Revit still thinks that we are working as architectural. That's the default setting for the metric multidiscipline. So in here, you can go ahead and see which plan you actually want to use. You can switch from architectural plan to lighting plan, mechanical, plumbing, power plan, site plan, and then working plan. You see that we don't actually have a structural plan over here, but properties panel allows you to see which view you have and also change properties of that view. So the current scale for that view is 1:100. There's also display level of normal and display detail level of coarse. You can also change the visibility and graphics of this particular view to show you a lot more. And like I said, it's actually going to make a lot more sense when we start modeling. Below the properties panel is going to be the project browser, where you can find floor plans, elevations, and 3D views of the model that you're creating. Is basically how you navigate through your model when you're working. So you can, if you scroll down a little bit, you can see other plans. You can see you have mechanical plan, plumbing plan, and of course the structural plan is in there. This is where we can go ahead and switch from the architectural plan that we see here to a structural plan. So if you go back to structural and see structural plan, just click the plus button here, and you can see L1 structural. Just go ahead and double click that. It's going to take us to L1 structural. So any structural element you model here is going to appear here. In case you start modeling in your L1 architectural and you don't see some structures, remember that you have to be in the structural plan for some structures to actually appear. So for structural models, I like to recommend that we start with creating a structure for that model. I know that sounded very unique, but just hear me out. So we're going to start first with the datum level here, or the datum menu or contextual ribbon that says datum. Just head over here, and then you're going to see grid. Grid actually creates a sort of arrangement for where your columns and beams are going to be aligned. It's very useful when it comes to structural modeling. So just go ahead and click your grid, and then you can go ahead and design where you want your grid to be. So you can head over to the datum contextual ribbon here and go ahead and click grid lines. And then once your cursor comes up, you can see that we have properties for the grid that you can go ahead and create. The grid properties, you can go ahead and change it to whichever one you want. We want grid that has 8mm bubble. You can also choose to disable the bubble, but let's just go ahead and create one grid line. We're going to just click one and then drag and draw it this other way, and then we have a grid line selected. You can see that there's also a label for the grid line. If I go ahead and click escape a few times, you can see the grid line here. It has alphabet of 1. And in order to go ahead and create more, you can just go to the structure tab just like we did and select more grids, and let's go ahead and create another one for grid number 2. Or you can just go ahead and select one of the grid lines and then go ahead and click copy in the modify panel here. Once you go ahead and click copy, make sure that one of them is selected. If nothing is selected, Revit is going to ask you to select an item that you want to copy. We're just going to go ahead and click copy from here. We can then select one point in the grid line and then just copy it over to the next line. You can see that I've not yet actually given dimensions of these grid lines yet, but that is something you can do immediately after creating a grid line. I'm just going to go ahead and select this one, and the spacing here between the grid line number 1 and grid line number 2 is 5,000. I'm just going to go ahead and select the dimension here, just double click it, and then you can go ahead and change the value. I'm going to set this one to 2.8 meters, so that's 2,800 millimeters. Go ahead and select enter. The item that you selected is going to be the one to move. Now that we have our grid selected, we can go ahead, we've set the spacing, we can go ahead and make changes to it. I can go ahead and check this button here beside the left hand side of the grid to allow the label on the grid to actually pop up. You can do the same thing for this other side. Just go ahead and click the checkbox to turn on the label for that grid on both sides. I can go ahead and also create a vertical grid in this sense. So go ahead and click the grid and then draw from up. I'm just going to go ahead and move vertical downwards to create another vertical grid. And just like that, we can go ahead and turn on this label as well, and you can go ahead and change the label for this one, and we can change it from alphabet, we can change it from number 4 to represent A. So just go ahead and do that. Now every other grid that we create that is vertical like this is going to have an alphabetical arrangement. Let's go ahead and create a few more vertical grids. You can see B here. We can go ahead and create a copy of this one and just select this one. Go ahead and hit enter once you select, and then you can go ahead and choose one point in the grid and then choose the next point, C, D, E. So now that we have our grids created, we can go ahead and turn on the labels and also give them dimensions to actually match the structure that we're trying to create. So we're almost done creating the grid lines, and we've put all the spacing for what we're looking for. And then what I want to do is to create one more grid at the bottom right here, but I noticed that this grid actually has to be horizontal and not vertical, that has alphabetical labels. So what I want to do is just draw a single line here. It's going to also be alphabetical like this. I'm just going to go ahead and change this from F to number 4. And just to follow the horizontal labels as well. Now the spacing between this one and the rest is actually much larger, so I'm going to go ahead and select 4 and then go ahead and give this 4,080 millimeters, and that is going to be the spacing for this region. So this is roughly the frame that we have. Now that we have our grid all set up, the next thing that we want to do is to go ahead and insert our structural elements. But before we go ahead to create those structural elements, we want to create the levels for each of these structural elements that we're going to put into place. So in order to do that, we have to head over to the project browser and choose one of the elevations. Let's go ahead and choose the building section. We can choose to use the east elevation. And once you select our east elevation, you can see the L1 that we went on to create. You can see also the vertical, or in this case the horizontal grids 1, 2, 3 and 4 that we went on to create. So the first we want to create, we have a level for level 1, which is like the ground plane. You can actually go ahead and change the name of this level to, let's say, ground level. Let's go ahead and put that in, and then also we can go ahead and change this one to maybe first floor. I'm using that as generic names for structural elements. There would probably be normal names that you can use for this ones, but what I follow as industry standard here is ground level and first floor. This is going to be on level 0, but we want to create another level below the ground level where we can go ahead and add foundations or footings. So what we want to do is head over to structure and head over to level. You can only see levels in the datum column when you're inside an elevation. If you're in a different floor plan, you may not have the level selection enabled, so you have to go to an elevation in order to do this. I'm going to go ahead and click level, and just like we created grids, we're now going to go ahead and click levels. What you want to do is just click on any point and draw a line to draw a new level. That level is going to take shape, and it's also going to have a dimension that is set like this, and we can go ahead and change it. Currently you can use a checkbox here to turn on the label for that level. I'm going to go ahead and change the spacing or the depth of this level from 1900 to 1500. That's going to be our depth to the footing. You notice that in Revit 2025, the level that we just created does not have a name. It doesn't have a floor plan as well. You can check the project browser. You might not be able to find it. So that's something new I noticed in Revit, which is not really nice. But in order to fix that, you just have to go ahead and select the level. We're going to have to go ahead and give it a name now. So you want to go over to your view tab. In your view tab, you're going to see plan view. So go ahead and click the plan view, select the drop down. You can see structural plan. Go ahead and select structural plan. And then you're going to see L3, which is the level that is supposed to be this one. Just go ahead and click OK to create a floor plan for that level. Now we have L3 created. So you can go over to structural floor plans. You can scroll through the project browser like this to find the structural floor plans. You can see L3 level. Just go ahead and select that. And then you can go ahead and give it a name. You can rename it and call it L3. Footing. Would you like to rename the corresponding levels and views? Yes, I would like to do that. Now that we've created our footing level, you can see that the level is not still selected. Here we have to go back to the properties panel with the level selected. You can see level no head. Go ahead and change that to level 8mm head or head symbol on both ends. We're going to use this architecture 8mm head on both ends. Let's go ahead and select that, and you can see that Revit actually puts the label for that footing. So we have L3 now. They look quite different. So for now, I think we're going to just change this from L3 to maybe L0 because it's before the first one. Let's go ahead and change the corresponding view. So that makes a lot more sense now for us. So you can go over to this one and change it to L1. Oops, I made a mistake there. Go ahead and make this L1. Now that we have our level set up, we've also set up grids. We can start putting in the structural elements now. We're going to start off with columns, and you can go back to the structure tab here and go ahead and select a column. The first column you see here is a steel column. This is the MHSS hollow steel section, HS152. There are different other types of columns. You can see a concrete column in here. You can see a universal column as well in steel. I'm actually going to create a composite column, which is the combination of a steel column and a concrete column. So first of all, we're going to go ahead and select the 254 by 254 universal column. I'm just going to go ahead and once you have the column selected in the properties panel, you can choose to place your columns at the grid lines, or you can choose to take your cursor over to one of the grids one by one and put in those columns manually. But since our building is not a complete square like this, we're going to have to use our cursor to place the columns manually. So I'm going to go back to intersection of B and 1 and just place a column in there. I'm going to do the same thing for B2 and A3. I'm just going to go ahead and put the columns like this. One after the other, we can go ahead and select those columns. Just going to choose one here and here. Here and here. That's going to add two more in the middle and here and here. So now that we have our columns in place, we have our steel columns in place, you can go ahead and look at how the building looks like in 3D. You can go ahead and go to the default view here and turn on 3D. You can see your steel columns, they look quite short, and that's because we're in the L1 structural column. So in order to add the concrete column on top of the steel column, because that's the plan here to create a composite column, you can go ahead and choose a different one. Let's say this 300 by 450 column is quite big, but it's going to envelope this steel column here. Now there's another option here to place this at columns, but I noticed this actually works for architectural columns, and since we're creating a structural plan, we still have to follow the system of placing each of these concrete columns at the intersections of where we have our steel columns. So that is what we're going to go ahead and do. Now that we have our columns in place, the next thing we want to do is to go ahead and assign beams to these columns. You can go ahead and choose beam from this tool, and just like beams, you can go ahead and see different types of beams. There's concrete beams, there's also steel beams, but currently we have only steel beams that are inside of Revit by default right now. Currently in Revit 2025, you may not have access to all of the structural elements like families. Like we currently have only steel beams in here. For some reason, you have to load in the content library for FM 2025 You can find that on the Autodesk website when you go ahead and click it, or you can just go over to the Insert tab and go ahead and click Load Autodesk Family, and it's going to take you directly to where you can actually download the content library and then have a lot more properties to actually choose from. So for the sake of this video, we're actually going to go ahead and focus on only the steel beams that we have in here, just to show you how you can actually import them. Go ahead and select one of the steel. I'm going to actually use this W410. And let's go ahead and select just at the intersection of the beams and the column, or at the intersections of these columns. Go ahead and click that point, and then you can run your beam just like this, and then you notice that we have an arrow popping up, but we cannot actually see the structural frame of the beam itself. That is because we're currently using a very low level of detail. To change the level of detail inside of Revit, you can change the detail level from the properties of the structural plan. Head over to the properties tab in here, and just you can see detail level is set to coarse. We're going to go ahead and change that from coarse to medium or fine. I'm going to select fine and then click apply. You can see that the frame of that beam actually comes up and becomes alive. Another way you can actually change it is from below here, just beside the scale. You can change the detail level from this box here, click it, and then change it to medium. So we're currently going to set this to medium, and then we can go ahead and proceed with creating more beams. In Revit, there are keyboard shortcuts as well. If I want to continue creating the beam, I'll just go ahead and press C and S, which is create similar. That is going to allow us create more beams. If that doesn't work out, go ahead and select the beam itself and then press C and S. That's going to allow us create more of that kind. It's called the create similar shortcut. So go ahead and click this midpoint here, select another point here. We're going to keep going down. We're actually going to take this all the way to the end. I'm just going to pick this midpoint here and just draw it to the end. And you notice I'm drawing each beam individually, step by step, to connect with the columns. That is actually the way to go. You cannot just select one point here and draw it all the way to the end and skip the beams that are in between. You can't just go over here and then click midpoint and then draw it all the way to the end. But let's just try that and see. I've always been used to clicking each beam one by one. Just go ahead and select it, and then you can see that one beam just stretches across different columns like that. I don't really trust this method because I want each of the beams actually connect to the column itself. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one, and then go ahead and select this, and then say create similar again. It's going to allow us create that beam one more time. And we're just going to go ahead and do it individually like this. That's better. Now that we have our beams in place, it's time to actually show you another quick way of creating beams inside of Revit, which is the beam systems. So you can see the beam systems here under the structure contextual ribbon. You can go ahead and select it, and once you have the beam systems all set up, you can see you have beam structural framing set. The beams that we're going to be using, you can go over to the properties panel and change most of the settings that are in here. You can scroll down and see the shape that we're going to use. It says here 410 by 38. We're going to just change that to a smaller section, which is a 360 by 32 MW beam shape. What we want to do is, once you take your mouse over to this part, you can see that in this big space here, I do not want to create two beams here. I wanted to create a set of beams, which is the beam system that we're talking about. You can go ahead and change the spacing as well. Currently, the spacing is set to 1.8 meters, thereabout. I'm just actually going to change this to 1.2 meters. That's going to be the height of each of these beams, since we're using a small section. So now that we have, you just take your cursor very close to one of these other beams here and click. The Revit is going to go ahead to create a beam system for you using those specifications that you set. This is very good if you want to create beams across a particular dimension or across a particular span. It actually works that way, just like we did here. Now that we have our beams and columns and beam system in place, we can look at what our building looks like in 3D. This is what our structural frame actually looks like. Now that we've completed our beam system and our columns and our beams all set, it's now time to actually look at how we can create a footing for this building. In order to create a footing, we actually need to go into the footing floor plan, but you notice that we don't have the grids in here as well. So instead of creating the grid all over again, you can head over to the structural plan here and just go ahead and select everything. In Revit, if you go ahead and select your mouse on the top and then move it to the right like this, it gives you a square selection. This allows you to select everything. If you move towards the left hand side like this, anything the cursor touches goes on to get selected. But if you're using it from the left like this towards the right, you have to select everything completely for it to become selected. So this is the method that we're going to use. Once you've selected everything, I'm just going to use a filter to take out what I don't need. All I need is grids. So I'm going to uncheck every beam and every column on every framing and only allow the grids, and then go ahead and click apply and click OK. Once we have our grid selected, we can go over to the clipboard here and select copy to clipboard. Once we have the grids copied, we can head over to paste, and we're going to head over to the footing tab here and then over to paste, and then we're going to say align to selected levels. Once you have that, go ahead and select the footing level and then click OK. Revit is going to give us all the grids back. You notice that the grid has its own numbers. That's because Revit doesn't want to use a repeat value for this one, so we're just going to allow it to be there. You can go ahead and uncheck the labels for this grid since we already know what the grids actually look like and what labels they have. We're just going to uncheck them for reference purposes. So in order to create a footing inside of Revit, you can head over to the footings for our foundation contextual ribbon here. We can see an isolated footing. You can go ahead and choose one isolated footing and just take it below one of the columns like this and then just select it. But I notice this footing is very big, so we're going to go ahead and change this to one of the smaller ones. Since we don't have one, I think the next one is much bigger. You can go ahead and edit the properties of this footing. In order not to lose the original dimensions, you can go ahead and click duplicate to actually duplicate the footing. So we're going to have a 450 depth footing, but instead we're going to use 900 here, or 600, 900 by 600 footing, and then go ahead and click OK. For the footing thickness is 450 accepted. The width is going to be 900 by the length of 600. So I know the length is supposed to be the longer side, but for the purpose of this, let's go ahead and click apply and click OK. So we have our footing in place now. It's a lot smaller than we imagined. So we can go ahead and still change the dimension to something else. Let's just try 900 by 1200. Go ahead and click apply and then have the longer side. You can change the name now from 600 here to have this to be 1200. Go ahead and click OK and click OK. So this is going to be our footing. You can just go ahead and insert the footing into every single column here. Now I've gone ahead to add footing to every other edge here, but what I want to do is to actually create a combined footing for these columns that are a lot closer together. So in order to do that, we actually need to create a dimension for them too. We're going to edit this type here and just make this one to be 1.2 by 1.8. Or I think we already have a dimension like that, right? 1.2 by 1.8. So we have a combined footing here. It's not as big as we need it to be, so we're just going to go ahead and change this. The width could be 1.5 by 1.8. So we're going to hide and duplicate this. 1.5 by 1.8. Go ahead and click OK. Not exactly what I'm looking for. I can still go ahead and change this. This is going to be 1.4. I'm going to make this 2.1. Click apply and click OK. Yeah, we're going to settle for this and just use that to create the footings that are here for the combined footings. So that's how you can go about creating footing inside of Revit. You have the footing to combine with the columns, and you go back to the sectional view in east elevation. You can see that the footing takes the exact position where it's supposed to be, just underneath the column the way it's supposed to be. So that's how we go about creating the footing. It's directly on the L0 that we went on to set. That is why it's important to go about setting your levels. It actually helps you place elements in the right place. Now we have our beams, we have our footing, we have our beam systems as well. We can go ahead and create a structural floor or a structural slab. You can see the footing for slab, but this is under foundation. What we need to actually create is a floor. So under the floor, you can see structural floor as well. Go ahead and select structural floor. There's a generic 300 floor, concrete. We're looking for a concrete 250 floor. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and then all we have to do here is just to draw the boundary of the floor that it's going to take. So you can start from here, use your cursor, and then create just at the center line of each of them, and then go scrolling all the way down like this. Okay. You have to make sure you are exactly at the center line, or else it's not going to connect for some reason. So we have one more point to actually do here, center line. If Revit doesn't show you the square, then it's not yet at the end point. So that's what you need to have in mind. We're just going to go ahead and delete this one because I don't think it's correct. I'm going to use the draw line again. Thank you. Endpoint to endpoint. So now that we have the boundary of our floor, we can go ahead and click accept. And Revit is going to go ahead and create the structural floor for us. So we have a floor now, what we like to call the decking. But you notice that our structural columns here are currently set to level 0 all the way up to level 1, which is the ground level. We actually want to pull them all the way up to level 2. So what you want to do is go ahead and select this and then change the top level of that from level 1 to level 2, which is the first floor, and then go ahead and click apply. And the columns are going to go all the way up. We can use that to select every single other column that is in here. You can go ahead and select the column and then right click and say select all instances that are visible in the view. Every single column is going to be selected, and you can go ahead and change the top level and have all of them go all the way to the first floor. Revit is actually assigning the column and then dropping it downwards. That's why we actually needed to make this change. We can also choose to copy the beams from this floor over to the top floor as well in order to complete the structure. You can go ahead and select one of these beams, right click as well, and say select all instances in that are visible in view, for example. Now we have this, and just go ahead and click copy to clipboard. Once you have that copied, you can go back to paste to select the levels and go ahead and choose the first floor. Go ahead and click OK. Revit is going to copy those beams over. So you can use this method to actually keep creating a bit more levels for yourself, depending on the project that you're working on. This is going to save you some time rather than having you create each structural element over and over again. Now you notice that there are no dimensions for this beam. We can go ahead and assign dimensions inside of Revit, but that's another video completely. What we want to do next is to actually assign tags to this beam so we can know what each beam stands for. In the annotate tab, you can go back there and then look for tags, tag by category or tag everyone. You can go ahead and select tag by category, and then you can choose to head over to one of the beams. You can see once you head over to the beam here, it actually creates a tag. We can do the same thing here. Revit goes on to create a tag for you, and then you can go ahead and move the tag wherever you want it to be. You want it to be closer to the beam, just have that in there. It gives you the dimension of that beam or the property of that beam that we went on to tag. You can also tag concrete columns. You just take our cursor near the concrete column here, 300 by 400. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for every column that is in here. This is how you can go about assigning labels to your structural elements inside of Revit, and you can move them around just like the same way you went about creating them. Just move the label a lot closer to this one. The next thing we need to do is actually export this to maybe a PDF file or a document format. And to do that, we actually need to print this as a sheet. In the project browser, you can find different sheets. Inside the Sheets tab, you can see sheets here, or just go ahead and uncheck this option. And you can see architectural floor plan sheets, building elevations, lighting, power plans, and also structural sheets. They have S101 and S102. Or you can go ahead and click the S1 and then open the sheet in the new tab. You can go ahead and see the sheet. It looks really, really small with the floor plan in here. All you have to do for this one is to go ahead and change the scale of the floor plan. You can go back to L1 structural and then change our scale now from this to maybe 100 or 1:50 instead of 1:100. Once you change it to 1:50, it looks a bit better. You can maybe drop the scale for this guys and bring them a lot closer together, just to make everything fit into the floor plan like it should. This is just normal post-processing inside of Revit. Once you have this all set up together like this, you can head over to the S101. You can't really see anything yet, but if you zoom out, you can see the floor plan in here, and then use your cursor to actually click and drag to align it into the center. And the label for the floor plan is floating outside. You can go ahead and select this one as well and drag it all the way in here so you can have that label selected. Now that we have this in place, we might get away with making it a bit bigger. So let's get over here and change this to 1:25 and see what happens. It's still very big now, but we can go ahead and drag this into frame. That's better. So you can go ahead and select this one, and once that's there, you can try to select just this guy and bring it in here. So we have our floor plan inside the sheet now. It looks well arranged, but the font may be a bit small. Once we have our structural plan on the sheet, the next thing we want to do is to actually plot this. So you can head over to just above the steel tab here. You can see the print option. Go ahead and click print. It's going to bring up a dialog box for you. Instead of printing, what we're going to, instead of using current view, we want to go ahead and print selected sheets or views. Just go ahead and click select. We're going to uncheck everything that is in here. All we need is the structural plans 101. So you can go ahead and uncheck all the other options until you have only structural plan 101, because that is the only one that we worked on. Go ahead and select that option. Go ahead and hit select. Do you want to save the settings for future Revit use? Nope, because we can go ahead and change that anytime we want. Microsoft Print to PDF, that's what we're going to use. And then go ahead, save this wherever you can find it, and go ahead and click OK. Revit is going to ask you if you want to print just the one, because that's what we're doing for the sake of this video. Go ahead and click one, and then choose your save location, and then click save. Give it a file name. Let's just call it structure. Once you have structure 01 set, go ahead and click save. Revit is going to go ahead and export that file for you. Wow, I noticed we haven't been saving the project all this while, so let's go ahead and click save. Once it's done exporting, you can head over to where you saved your file, and you can go ahead and see the structure that we went on to export. You can zoom into it. It's currently set in a PDF file, but as you zoom in, the quality of this file actually gets clearer, so you can see all the labels. It's almost like a vector format. There are a lot of graphics and visibility you can go ahead and set to make this look prettier, but for now, this is the basic method you can actually use to go ahead and create a structural floor plan inside of Autodesk Revit. If you found this useful, do well to leave a like on the video, and for more architectural tutorials on Revit like this, do well to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.